Emily stood in front of our bedroom mirror, applying lipstick with the precision of a surgeon. Red. Always red when she was going out without me. Her reflection caught mine watching from the doorway, and she smiled that practiced smile I'd grown to recognize over the past 6 months. "Don't wait up tonight, honey," she said, turning to kiss my cheek. The scent of her expensive perfume, the one I didn't buy her, filled the space between us. Girls' night is going to run late. I leaned against the doorframe of our Victorian fixer-upper, arms crossed, watching her performance. 20 years as a union electrician had taught me to spot faulty wiring, and Emily's circuits had been sparking for months. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she guarded her phone like it contained state secrets. "Tell Mark I said hi," I said, my voice casual as a Sunday morning. Emily's hand froze halfway to her purse. The lipstick tube clattered onto our hardwood floor, rolling under the antique dresser her mother had given us for our 10th anniversary. Her face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "What did you say?" Her voice cracked on the last word. "You heard me, Em." She turned fully toward me now, her composure cracking like ice on a warm day. "Sean, you're being ridiculous. Mark is your brother. Why would you even—" "We'll see about that." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a house fire. Emily's eyes darted to her phone on the nightstand, then back to me. I could practically see the wheels turning in her head, calculating, planning her next move. "I don't know what you think you know," she said, straightening her shoulders, "but you're wrong." I pulled her phone from my back pocket, the same phone she'd left charging in the kitchen while she showered. 20 years of rewiring houses had made me quick with my hands, and Emily had never been good with technology. Her password was still our anniversary date, because even liars need something real to remember. "Am I wrong about the Hampton Inn last Tuesday?" I scrolled through the messages, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Or maybe I'm wrong about how you told him I'm too boring for words, and that you can't wait to be done with this charade." Emily's face cycled through emotions like a broken traffic light. Shock, fear, anger. Then back to that calculating look I'd seen more often lately. "Sean, let me explain." "Explain what? How my wife has been screwing my brother for 6 months? How you've been laughing about me with him? How you called me a project you're tired of fixing?" I held up the phone, showing her own words reflected back at her. "Which part needs explaining, Em?" "Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." She lunged for the phone, but I was faster. Years of climbing ladders and crawling through tight spaces had kept me in better shape than her yoga classes had kept her. "Those messages are private." "So is our marriage, but that didn't stop you from sharing it with Mark, did it?" Emily's mask finally slipped completely. The woman I'd married, the one who used to laugh at my jokes and steal my hoodies on cold mornings, was gone. In her place stood a stranger with my wife's face and a heart I no longer recognized. "Fine," she said, her voice turning cold as January in Maine. "You want the truth?" "Yes, I'm seeing Mark. Yes, we've been together for months. And yes, I'm tired of pretending this marriage means something to me." The honesty hit harder than I'd expected, but I kept my expression neutral. 20 years of dealing with difficult contractors had taught me never to show weakness when someone was trying to break you down. "At least now we're being honest," I said. "How long were you planning to keep this going?" "Until I figured out the best way to leave you." She grabbed her purse from the dresser, her movements sharp and angry. "Mark thinks we should just tell everyone and be done with it. Mark thinks a lot of things. Most of them are wrong." Emily paused at the bedroom door, turning back to look at me one last time. "This house, this life, it's not enough anymore, Sean. It never was." "Then why did you stay?" For a moment, something flickered across her face. Regret, maybe, or just annoyance at being caught. "Because leaving is complicated, and I hate complications." She walked out, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors like a countdown timer. I heard the front door slam, then the sound of her car starting in our driveway. Through the bedroom window, I watched her taillights disappear down Maple Street, heading toward whatever lie she'd tell Mark about our conversation. I sat on the edge of our bed, my bed now, I supposed, and scrolled through more of their messages. The details were worse than I'd imagined. They hadn't just been having an affair, they'd been planning my humiliation. Mark had been feeding her information about family finances, about the inheritance from our grandmother's estate that was still tied up in probate. Emily had been documenting everything about our marriage, building a case for why she deserved more than half of everything we'd built together. But the worst part wasn't the betrayal or the scheming. It was how stupid they thought I was. Mark had written, Sean's too trusting. He'll never see this coming. Emily had replied, "He's always been naive. It's almost sad." Almost sad. 20 years of marriage, and I was almost sad to her. I picked up my own phone and opened a new message to Mark, typing from Emily's number. "He knows everything. We need to talk. Now." The response came back within seconds. "How much does he know?" "Everything. Meet me at your place in an hour." "What do we do?" I smiled as I typed Emily's response. "Whatever it takes." I set both phones aside and walked to the window overlooking our neighborhood. Mrs. Klein was walking her ancient beagle past our house, same as she did every evening at 8:30. Tommy's beat-up Honda was parked outside the Martinez house 3 doors down, probably helping fix their kitchen sink again. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that the Mallory marriage had just imploded. The house felt different now, quieter somehow. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind of silence that comes after a storm when you're assessing the damage. I'd spent 5 years renovating this place, turning it from a neglected Victorian into something Emily said she loved. New wiring, updated plumbing, restored hardwood floors. I'd fixed everything except the one thing that mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "We need to talk when I get home." I typed back, "Don't wait up. I'm busy." Then I walked downstairs to my workshop in the basement and started planning. Emily and Mark thought they were playing chess while I played checkers. They were about to learn that sometimes the electrician knows exactly where all the wires lead, and sometimes, when you flip the right switch, the whole house lights up. The quarry hadn't changed in the 15 years I'd been drinking there. Same sticky floors, same neon beer signs casting red and blue shadows across scarred wooden tables, same smell of fried food and broken dreams. It was the kind of place where secrets went to reproduce, and Linda Morrison had been tending bar long enough to know where all the bodies were buried. "You look like someone stole your lunch money," Linda said, sliding a beer across the bar without being asked. She was 50-something with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Emily working late again?" "Something like that." I took a long pull from the bottle, letting the cold beer wash away the taste of my wife's lies. "You ever notice how people think they're smarter than they actually are?" "Every day of my life, honey. What's eating you?" The bar was mostly empty. Just me, old Pete nursing his whiskey in the corner booth, and 2 guys from the paper mill arguing about the Patriots over a basket of wings. Perfect audience for what I had planned. "Found out Emily's been cheating on me," I said, loud enough for the mill workers to hear. "With my brother Mark." Linda's hand froze halfway to the cash register. "Jesus, Sean, you sure about that?" "Caught them red-handed." Well, caught their text messages red-handed. 6 months they've been carrying on behind my back. The mill workers had stopped arguing about football. Pete looked up from his whiskey with the interest of a man who'd lived through his own share of domestic disasters. Word would be all over town by morning, which was exactly what I wanted. "That's rough, buddy," Linda said, refilling my beer without being asked. "What are you going to do about it?" "Haven't decided yet. But Mark's always been the golden boy, you know? Star quarterback in high school, successful real estate business, drives that fancy BMW. Maybe it's time he learned what it feels like to lose something important." My phone buzzed with another message from Emily. "Where are you? We need to talk about this like adults." I showed the message to Linda, who snorted. "Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back for 6 months." That's what I told her. The bar door opened with its familiar squeak, and Tommy Rodriguez walked in, still wearing his work clothes from the electrical job we'd finished that afternoon. Tommy was 26, built like a fire hydrant, and loyal as a golden retriever. He'd been my apprentice for 3 years, and I trusted him more than most of my family, which, given recent events, wasn't saying much. "Boss?" Tommy slid onto the stool next to mine. "You left the job site in a hurry. Everything okay?" "Emily's been cheating on me with my brother." Tommy's face went through several expressions before settling on righteous anger. "Are you kidding me? With Mark? That pretentious piece of—" He glanced at Linda and cleaned up his language. "That guy's always rubbed me the wrong way. Join the club. We're thinking of getting T-shirts made." "What's the plan?" Tommy leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Because you know I'm in for whatever you need." I'd been hoping he'd say that. Tommy had skills that complemented mine. He was good with computers, better with people, and had a talent for being in the right place at the right time. Plus, he genuinely hated Mark, who'd once tried to get Tommy fired from a side job because he didn't like the music he played while working. "Mark's car has one of those GPS tracking systems," I said, "for his real estate business. He showed it off at Christmas, remember? Said it helped him keep track of his vehicle for insurance purposes." "Yeah, I remember. Guy couldn't stop bragging about it." Well, I installed the electrical system in his condo last year. Still have the access codes for his building's parking garage. Tommy's grin was worth the price of admission. You want to pay him a little visit? I want to send a message. Nothing illegal, nothing that'll get us in trouble. Just something to let him know that his little secret isn't secret anymore. Linda had been listening while pretending to clean glasses. You boys be careful, she said. Mark Foster's got connections in this town. His real estate firm handles half the commercial properties downtown. So did my electrical company until Emily started poisoning the well, I replied. Amazing how many clients suddenly found other contractors after she started working her magic. That was another piece of the puzzle I'd figured out over the past few hours. Emily worked in HR for the biggest employer in town, and she had lunch with the wives of half my commercial clients. The sudden drop in business over the past 6 months hadn't been coincidence. It had been sabotage. All right, Tommy said, finishing his beer in one gulp. Let's go send your brother a message he won't forget. We left the quarry just as the evening crowd was starting to filter in. The October air was crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke and fading leaves that meant winter was coming whether we were ready or not. Tommy followed me in his Honda while I drove my work truck through the familiar streets of downtown, past the empty storefronts and struggling businesses that had been fighting a losing battle against the big box stores outside of town. Mark's condo building was a glass and steel monument to his success, all clean lines and expensive landscaping. It stood out among the older brick buildings like a sore thumb, which was probably exactly what he'd intended. The parking garage was in the basement, accessible through a keypad-controlled gate that I'd wired myself 18 months ago. Still can't believe he lives in this place, Tommy muttered as we descended into the underground garage. Looks like something out of a science fiction movie. Mark always did like showing off. His BMW was parked in its assigned spot, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a black jewel. I'd always wondered how a small-town real estate agent could afford a car that cost more than most people made in a year, but Emily had explained that Mark was just good with money. Now I wondered what other explanations Emily had given me that didn't quite add up. What's the plan? Tommy asked, pulling a small toolkit from his jacket. I'd been thinking about this during the drive over. Mark's car was his pride and joy, the thing he used to impress clients and pick up women, including my wife, but damaging it would be vandalism, and I wasn't interested in giving him ammunition to use against me. We're not going to hurt the car, I said. We're going to improve it. From my truck, I pulled out a small device I'd picked up from the electronics store that afternoon, a Bluetooth speaker, the kind teenagers use to annoy their neighbors. Tommy caught on immediately. Oh, this is good. This is very good. We spent 20 minutes carefully installing the speaker inside Mark's rear bumper, connecting it to a small battery pack and a prepaid phone I'd bought with cash. The whole setup was invisible from the outside, but would turn Mark's precious BMW into a mobile boombox whenever I felt like calling the phone. Test it, I said, stepping back to admire our work. Tommy dialed the number. The phone rang once, then connected, and suddenly Mark's car was playing polka music at conversation volume, loud enough to be heard, not loud enough to damage anything or violate noise ordinances. Beautiful, Tommy said, ending the call. When do you plan to use it? Tomorrow morning. Mark always stops at that coffee place on Main Street before work. Should be interesting to see how he explains why his car is suddenly playing the chicken dance in the middle of downtown. We were walking back to our vehicles when my phone rang. Emily's number appeared on the screen, and I considered letting it go to voicemail before deciding I was curious what she had to say. Sean, where are you? Her voice was tight with stress. I've been driving around looking for you. I'm out. Thought you didn't want me to wait up. We need to talk about this situation like mature adults. Mature adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back for 6 months, Em, but I'm willing to listen. Where do you want to meet? There was a pause, and I could hear her talking to someone else, Mark, probably, coaching her on what to say. Come home, she said finally. We'll talk there. I don't think so. Too many memories in that house, and most of them are lies now. How about somewhere public? The diner on Route 9? Fine. Give me 30 minutes. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. I hung up and turned to Tommy, who'd been listening with obvious interest. She wants to meet, I said. Probably thinks she can talk her way out of this. You want backup? Not yet, but keep your phone on. If this goes sideways, I might need a witness. Tommy nodded and headed for his car, but paused before getting in. Boss? Whatever happens, you know you're better off without her, right? Emily never appreciated what she had. I'm starting to figure that out. As I drove toward the diner, I couldn't help but think about the woman Emily used to be, the one who'd brought me coffee on cold job sites, who'd laughed at my terrible jokes, who'd spent weekends helping me renovate our house. That woman had been real once, or at least I'd thought she was. But people change, and sometimes they change into strangers who happen to share your last name. My phone buzzed with a text from the prepaid number connected to Mark's car speaker. "Ready when you are." I smiled and typed back, "Tomorrow morning, rush hour, make it count." Time to see how Mark handled a little public embarrassment. And after that, Emily and I were going to have a conversation about the future, or lack thereof, of our marriage. The game was just getting started. The Route 9 diner looked like it hadn't been updated since the Carter administration, which was part of its charm. Red vinyl booths, black and white checkered floors, and a waitress named Dolores who'd been serving coffee and attitude in equal measure for 30 years. It was neutral ground, public enough to keep things civil, but private enough for the kind of conversation that ends marriages. Emily was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth with her back to the wall like she was expecting trouble. She'd changed clothes since our confrontation at home. Gone was the red lipstick and date night outfit, replaced by jeans and a sweater that made her look younger, more like the woman I'd married. It was a calculated choice, and we both knew it. "You look tired," she said as I slid into the seat across from her. "Funny how learning your wife's been lying to you for months will do that." Dolores appeared with coffee without being asked, setting down 2 cups and walking away without a word. She'd probably seen enough domestic drama over the years to recognize it from across the room. Emily wrapped her hands around her cup like she was trying to warm something that had gone cold a long time ago. "Sean, I know you're angry." "Angry?" I laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. Angry is what I get when the Patriots lose. This is something else entirely." "Then what is it?" I studied her face, looking for some trace of the woman who used to steal my hoodies and leave me notes in my lunchbox. Disappointed, I guess, in you, in Mark, in myself for not seeing it sooner. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." "How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to send me a memo? Maybe a PowerPoint presentation about why you'd rather be with my brother?" Emily's composure cracked slightly. "Don't be sarcastic. This is hard enough already." "Hard for who? You've been living a double life for 6 months? I've been living in a marriage that apparently ended sometime last spring, only nobody bothered to tell me." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I never meant for you to find out like this." "How did you mean for me to find out? Were you ever going to tell me? Or was I supposed to figure it out when you moved in with Mark?" The question hung between us like smoke. Emily looked out the window at the parking lot, where a few other late-night diners were coming and going. Normal people with normal problems, not sitting in a diner at 9:30 on a Tuesday night trying to figure out how to divide up 20 years of shared history. "I don't know," she said finally. "I was still trying to figure things out." "What's to figure out? You're sleeping with my brother. You've been planning to leave me. You think I'm boring and naive and almost sad. Seems pretty straightforward to me." Emily winced at her own words being quoted back to her. "Those texts were private conversations. You had no right—" "I had no right?" My voice rose enough to make Dolores look over from behind the counter. "You're carrying on with Mark in my hometown, in places where people know us both, and you're worried about your privacy? Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid people might find out?" "Because I've got news for you, Em. They already know. Small towns don't keep secrets very well." That got her attention. Emily's eyes snapped back to mine, and I could see the calculation starting again. "What do you mean they already know?" "I mean, I stopped by the quarry before coming here, had a beer with Linda and a few of the regulars, mentioned that my wife was cheating on me with my brother. You know how these things spread." The color drained from Emily's face. "You told people. Sean, my job." "Your job?" I set my coffee cup down harder than necessary. "You work in HR, Emily. You know exactly what happens when word gets out about office affairs and family drama. You knew the risks when you started this thing with Mark. It's not that simple. Then explain it to me. Make me understand how my wife decided that my brother was a better option than working on our marriage." Emily was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee like it might contain answers to questions she didn't want to ask. When she finally looked up, there was something different in her expression, not quite regret, but maybe acknowledgement. "Do you remember what you said on our anniversary last year?" she asked. "Which part?" "You said we were comfortable, that we'd found our rhythm and could just coast from here." I did remember saying that, though it sounded different now than it had at the time. I meant we'd figured out how to be happy together. "I heard that we'd stop trying, that you thought what we had was enough, and it would never need to be more than that." "So you decided to find more with Mark?" "I decided to find out what I was missing." The honesty was brutal, but at least it was honest. I'd spent months wondering what I'd done wrong, what I could have done differently. Turns out the answer was nothing and everything. And what did you find out? Emily's smile was sad and a little bitter. That Mark tells me I'm exciting, that he thinks I'm wasted in this town, with this life, that I deserve better than comfortable. And you believe him? I want to believe him. There it was, the truth that explained everything and nothing. Emily hadn't left me for Mark. She'd left me for the version of herself that Mark reflected back at her. The exciting woman, the one too good for small-town life, the one who deserved more than a union electrician and a Victorian fixer-upper. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know. Mark thinks we should just be honest about everything. Stop sneaking around. Mark thinks a lot of things. Most of them are wrong. He's not wrong about this. We can't keep pretending our marriage is something it isn't. I finished my coffee and signaled Dolores for the check. You're right about that. Our marriage is over, Em. Has been for months, apparently. The only question now is how we handle the cleanup. Sean? No, you've made your choice. Mark's made his. Now I get to make mine. I left a $10 bill on the table and stood up. Emily reached for my hand, but I pulled away. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to go home, to my house that I've spent 5 years fixing up, and I'm going to figure out what comes next. You can go wherever you want. Mark's place, your sister's house, a hotel. I don't really care anymore. This doesn't have to be ugly, Sean. We can handle this like adults. I paused at the edge of the booth, looking down at the woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams for 20 years. Adults don't sneak around behind their spouse's back, Emily. Adults don't mock their husband to his own brother. Adults don't spend 6 months planning someone's humiliation and call it love. I never wanted to hurt you. But you did anyway, and the worst part is, you enjoyed it. I walked out of the diner without looking back, leaving Emily sitting alone in the corner booth with her cold coffee and her choices. The October night was crisp and clear, stars visible despite the streetlights, and for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe properly. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. How'd it go? About like you'd expect. She's not coming home tonight. You okay? Getting there. Tomorrow's going to be interesting. I drove home through empty streets, past the houses where normal families were settling in for the night. The Victorian looked different as I pulled into the driveway. Not lonely exactly, but expectant, like it was waiting to see what would happen next. Inside, the house felt bigger without Emily's presence. I walked through the rooms we'd renovated together, remembering the plans we'd made, the dreams we'd shared. The kitchen where she'd cooked Sunday dinners, the living room where we'd watched movies on winter nights, the bedroom where we'd talked about having kids someday. All of it felt like artifacts from someone else's life. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, the good stuff I saved for special occasions, and sat in my workshop, surrounded by the tools of my trade. Tomorrow, Mark would discover that his car had developed a musical personality. Emily would wake up in whatever bed she'd chosen for the night, probably already regretting the conversation at the diner, and I would start figuring out what the rest of my life looked like without them in it. The whiskey burned going down, but it was a clean burn. Honest, like good whiskey should be, unlike some people I could mention. I woke up at 5:30, same as always, but for the first time in months, I wasn't reaching for my phone to check if Emily had texted during the night. She hadn't come home, not that I'd expected her to, and the house felt different in the morning light, quieter, but also somehow more mine. Coffee tasted better when you didn't have to wonder if your wife was lying about where she'd spent the night. I sat at the kitchen table, watching Mrs. Klein walk her ancient beagle past the front window, and planned my day. First stop, downtown, to see how Mark handled his car's new musical capabilities. Second stop, work, where Tommy and I had a rewiring job at the old Hendricks building. Third stop, wherever the day took me. My phone rang at 7:15. Mark's number appeared on the screen, and I let it ring twice before answering. Morning, brother. Sean, we need to talk. Mark's voice was tight with stress and barely controlled anger. About Emily, about last night, about this whole situation. What about it? Don't play games with me. Emily told me about your conversation at the diner. This doesn't have to get ugly. I walked to the front window, coffee mug in hand, and looked out at the neighborhood coming to life. School buses, commuters heading to work, normal people starting normal days. Ugly? I said. Mark, you've been screwing my wife for 6 months. We passed ugly somewhere around Memorial Day. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? Were you planning to ask my permission first? There was a pause, and I could hear traffic in the background. Mark was probably driving to work, getting ready to sell houses and charm clients while his personal life imploded. "Look," he said, "Emily and I, we didn't plan this. It just happened." "Nothing just happens, Mark. You made choices. She made choices. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done pretending we're still brothers. It means Emily can move in with you today for all I care. And it means you might want to think twice before showing your face around town for a while." "Are you threatening me?" I laughed, surprising myself. "Threatening you? Mark, I'm an electrician from Maine. I fix wiring and install ceiling fans. The most threatening thing I've done lately is tell Linda Morrison that my wife's been cheating on me with my brother. But you know how small towns work. Word travels fast. You son of a... Careful, brother. That's our mother you're talking about." Mark hung up, which was probably for the best. I finished my coffee, grabbed my work gear, and headed downtown to see the show. The coffee shop on Main Street was busy with the usual morning crowd, office workers grabbing their caffeine fix, retirees meeting for their daily gossip session, students from the community college loading up on sugar and stimulation. Mark's BMW was parked right out front, gleaming in the October sunshine. I parked across the street and pulled out the prepaid phone. The call connected on the second ring, and suddenly Mark's car was broadcasting polka music at a volume that made every head on the sidewalk turn. Through the coffee shop window, I could see Mark's face go from confusion to horror as he realized the music was coming from his precious BMW. He ran outside, fumbling with his key fob, but the music kept playing. A small crowd had gathered, some people laughing, others recording with their phones. Mark crawled under the car, looking for the source of the sound, his expensive suit getting dirty on the sidewalk. The music stopped when I ended the call, but the damage was done. Mark stood up, red-faced and furious, scanning the crowd for answers that weren't coming. His phone rang, probably clients wondering why their real estate agent's car was playing the chicken dance in downtown traffic. I drove away before he spotted me, but not before taking a few photos of my own. Tommy was going to love this. The Hendricks building was a 3-story brick structure that had been empty for 5 years, waiting for someone with enough money and vision to bring it back to life. The new owner wanted to convert it into apartments, which meant completely rewiring a building that hadn't been updated since the Eisenhower administration. Tommy was already there when I arrived, standing in the lobby with his tool bag and a grin that could have powered the building's lights. "Please tell me you saw it," he said before I was completely through the door. "Saw what?" "Mark's car concert. It's already on social media. Someone posted a video with the caption, 'When your car has better taste in music than you do.'" I tried to look innocent. "Really? That's terrible." "Terrible? Boss, it's beautiful. Half the town's talking about it already. Mark Foster's fancy BMW playing polka music on Main Street. That's going to be legend around here." We spent the morning running new electrical lines through walls that hadn't been opened since Truman was president. It was good work, the kind that required focus and precision, and it kept my mind off the fact that my marriage had officially ended in a diner booth the night before. Around noon, my phone rang. Emily's number. "You need to call off whatever you're doing to Mark," she said without preamble. "Hello to you too, Em. How was your night?" "I'm serious, Sean. This morning with his car, that was you, wasn't it?" "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've been rewiring the Hendricks building all morning. Ask Tommy." "Don't lie to me." "Lying?" I set down my wire strippers and walked to the window overlooking Main Street. "That's rich, coming from you. But for the record, I didn't do anything to Mark's car. If it's making music, maybe he should take it to a mechanic." "This isn't funny." "You're right, it's hilarious." Emily's voice went cold, the same tone she used at work when dealing with problem employees. "If you think embarrassing Mark is going to make me come back to you—" "Come back to me?" I interrupted. "Em, I wouldn't take you back if you came with a written guarantee and a 30-day return policy. You made your choice. Now live with it." "Fine. But leave Mark alone. Mark's a big boy. He can take care of himself." I hung up and went back to work. But the call had stirred something up. Emily wasn't worried about Mark's embarrassment. She was worried about her own reputation, the HR director who'd been carrying on with her husband's brother, the woman who'd been mocking her marriage while planning its destruction. Small towns didn't forgive that kind of behavior easily. "Everything okay?" Tommy asked, looking up from the junction box he was installing, getting better by the hour. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Mark. We need to meet. Tonight, somewhere private." I showed the message to Tommy, who whistled low. "He's using a different phone," Tommy observed. "Probably thinks you're tracking his calls. Paranoid much?" "What are you going to do?" I thought about it while I stripped copper wire. Mark wanted a private meeting, probably to threaten me or try to make some kind of deal, but I'd learned something important from Emily's betrayal. Information was power, and the person who controlled the narrative controlled the outcome. "I'm going to meet him," I said, "but not somewhere private, somewhere very public." "Where?" "The high school football game. Friday night lights, half the town in the stands. If Mark wants to talk, we'll talk where everyone can see us being civilized." I texted back, "Friday night, football game, north side bleachers, 7 p.m. The response came immediately. "This isn't a joke, Sean." "Neither is adultery, but that didn't stop you." Tommy laughed, but his expression was serious. "You sure about this, boss? Mark's got a temper when things don't go his way." "So do I. The difference is, I know how to control mine." We worked until 5, making good progress on the first floor wiring. The building was starting to feel alive again, ready for whatever came next. Kind of like me, I realized. On the way home, I stopped at the grocery store and ran into Linda Morrison in the produce section. She was examining apples with the intensity of a jeweler appraising diamonds. "Sean!" She looked around to make sure we weren't overheard, then leaned closer. "Heard about Mark's musical car this morning? Any idea what that was about?" "Not a clue, but it was entertaining." "That's one word for it." Poor Mark looked like he wanted to crawl under a rock. "Poor Mark?" Linda's expression shifted. "Honey, I know he's your brother, but what he's done to you... Well, let's just say karma has a sense of humor." "Karma and polka music, apparently." "How are you holding up?" It was a simple question, but it hit deeper than I'd expected. How was I holding up? 24 hours ago, I'd thought I was married to someone who loved me. Now I was buying groceries for one and planning my next move in a game I'd never wanted to play. "Better than I expected," I said, and realized it was true. Turns out losing something that was already gone isn't as painful as you'd think. Linda smiled and patted my arm. "You're going to be fine, Sean. Better than fine." I drove home through streets that looked different now. Not because anything had changed, but because I was seeing them with different eyes. This was still my town, my neighborhood, my life. Emily and Mark had taken themselves out of the equation, but everything else remained. The house welcomed me back like an old friend. I made dinner for one, watched the news, and sat in my workshop planning the next phase of Mark's education. Because if my brother thought a polka serenade was embarrassing, he was about to learn what real humiliation looked like. The game was just getting started. Friday night football in small-town Maine was religion, and the entire congregation had turned out for the homecoming game. The bleachers were packed with families, students, and anyone else looking for entertainment on a crisp October evening. Perfect cover for the kind of conversation that could define the rest of my relationship with my brother. I arrived early and claimed a spot halfway up the north side bleachers, where I had a clear view of the field and anyone approaching from either direction. The crowd was in good spirits, the home team was winning, the concession stand was doing steady business, and most people were blissfully unaware that the Mallory family drama was about to play out in front of them. Mark appeared at 7:15, scanning the crowd until he spotted me. He looked different than he had at family gatherings. Less polished, more desperate. His usual confidence had been replaced by something that looked suspiciously like fear. "Sean!" He settled onto the bleacher next to me, maintaining enough distance to avoid looking friendly. "Thanks for meeting me." "Wouldn't miss it. How's your car been running lately?" Mark's jaw tightened. "Very funny. You had your laugh. Can we move past the juvenile pranks now?" "Juvenile?" I kept my voice conversational, aware that Mrs. Patterson was sitting 2 rows behind us with her granddaughter. "Mark, I haven't done anything to you that you didn't do to yourself." "The car had a musical malfunction. These things happen with modern technology." Mark studied my face, looking for tells like we were playing poker instead of sitting at a high school football game. "Fine, play dumb if you want, but we need to talk about Emily." "What about her?" "She's leaving you, Sean. This marriage is over. The question is whether we handle this like adults or turn it into a circus." Down on the field, the home team scored another touchdown. The crowd erupted in cheers, and I clapped along with everyone else before turning back to my brother. "Adults," I said, "don't sneak around behind their family's back for 6 months. But I'm curious what you think handling this like adults looks like." Emily files for divorce. Clean, simple, no fault. You keep the house, she keeps her retirement account. Everybody moves on with their lives. And you get Emily. Emily makes her own choices. I laughed, but kept it quiet enough not to disturb the other spectators. "Mark, you've been making Emily's choices for her since spring. Don't pretend this is about her independence." "What's that supposed to mean?" It means you saw an opportunity to take something that belonged to me, and you took it, same as when we were kids, and you'd steal my Halloween candy. Mark's face flushed. This isn't about you, Sean. Emily was unhappy long before I came into the picture. So you decided to help her out? How generous of you. I decided to give her what she wasn't getting at home. The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Around us, normal families were enjoying a normal Friday night, cheering for their kids and their team. None of them knew they were witnessing the final collapse of the Mallory brothers' relationship. And what was that? I asked. Excitement. Adventure. Someone who sees her potential instead of taking her for granted. Someone who tells her what she wants to hear, you mean. Someone who appreciates what he has. I turned to face Mark fully, studying the man who'd shared my childhood and stolen my wife. You know what I appreciate, Mark? Honesty, loyalty, people who say what they mean and mean what they say. Emily stopped being those things months ago, which means you're welcome to her. Mark blinked, clearly not expecting that response. So, you'll agree to the divorce? I'll agree to the divorce. Clean, simple, no fault, just like you said. Emily can have her freedom, and you can have Emily. Everybody wins. Just like that? Just like that. Mark looked suspicious, like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. What's the catch? No catch, but I do have one condition. Which is? I smiled and waved at the Patterson family behind us, then turned back to Mark. I want you to tell Mom and Dad yourself, face to face. Explain how you ended up with your brother's wife. The color drained from Mark's face. Our parents were old-school Irish Catholic, the kind of people who still believed marriage vows meant something. They'd been married 43 years and had never understood why Mark and I hadn't settled down and given them grandchildren. Finding out that one son had stolen the other's wife wasn't going to go over well. Sean, that's not fair? Mark, you've been screwing my wife in my hometown for 6 months. Fair went out the window around the time you decided family loyalty was optional. They don't need to know the details. They're going to know anyway. Small town, remember? Better they hear it from you than from Linda Morrison or Mrs. Patterson here. Mark glanced back at Mrs. Patterson, who was definitely listening to our conversation while pretending to watch the game. This is blackmail. This is consequences. You wanted Emily, you got her. But you don't get her in the family's respect. Pick one. And if I refuse? I pulled out my phone and showed him the video of his car's polka performance, which now had over 300 views on social media. Then everyone in town gets to see what other creative malfunctions modern technology can produce. Mark stared at the phone screen, his face cycling through anger, fear, and resignation. You're enjoying this. More than I probably should, I admitted, but not as much as you enjoyed those text messages about how boring and naive I am. Emily was venting. People say things they don't mean when they're frustrated. For 6 months? Mark, that wasn't venting. That was planning. The fourth quarter was winding down, and families were starting to gather their things and head for the parking lot. Our conversation was running out of time and privacy. So what's it going to be? I asked. Do you tell Mom and Dad, or do I? Mark was quiet for a long moment, watching the final plays of the game without really seeing them. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible over the crowd noise. I'll tell them. When? Sunday dinner. I'll drive down and tell them Sunday. Good. Emily's welcome to come with you if she wants. Might as well get all the introductions out of the way. Mark stood up, his movements stiff and angry. You know this doesn't change anything, right? Emily's still leaving you. We're still together. I know, but at least now everyone knows what that cost. He walked away without another word, disappearing into the crowd heading for the parking lot. I stayed in my seat until the game ended and the stands emptied, watching the maintenance crew start cleaning up the debris of another Friday night in small-town America. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. How'd it go? Better than expected. Mark's going to tell our parents about Emily on Sunday. Ouch, that's going to be ugly. That's the point? I walked to my truck through the nearly empty parking lot, past families loading kids and coolers and memories of a good night out. The air was getting colder, carrying the promise of winter and change and whatever came after the leaves finished falling. At home, the house felt different again, not empty, but expectant, like it was waiting to see what would happen next. I poured myself a whiskey and sat in the kitchen, looking out at the neighborhood where I'd lived for 20 years. Emily hadn't called or texted since our conversation earlier in the week. Mark would probably tell her about our deal, and she'd have to decide whether she wanted to face our parents or let Mark handle the fallout alone. Either way, it wasn't my problem anymore. The whiskey was smooth and warm, and for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. In my house, in my town, in my life, without the people who'd decided I wasn't worth their honesty or loyalty. Tomorrow was Saturday. I had work to catch up on, a house to maintain, and a future to figure out. But tonight, I was content to sit in my kitchen and listen to the sound of my life settling into its new shape. It was quieter than before, but it was honest. And after 6 months of lies, honest felt pretty good. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, with a kind of October wind that stripped leaves from trees and reminded everyone that winter was coming whether they were ready or not. I spent the morning working in my shop, rebuilding a motor for Mrs. Henderson's garage door opener when my phone rang. Mom's number appeared on the screen, and I knew immediately that Mark had kept his word. "Sean, honey, can you come down for dinner today?" Her voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when she was trying not to cry. "Your father and I need to talk to you. Mark told you. Mark told us a lot of things, but I want to hear your side of the story." I set down my tools and walked to the window overlooking the backyard, where Emily's flower garden was fading back for the winter. She'd spent hours out there last spring, planting bulbs and planning what would bloom when. Now it looked abandoned, like everything else she'd left behind. "There's not much to tell, Mom. Emily's been having an affair with Mark for 6 months. They want to be together, so we're getting divorced." "Sean," the word came out like a sigh. "Why didn't you call us when you found out?" "Because I needed to figure out what I was going to do about it first." "And what are you going to do?" I thought about that while I watched a neighbor's cat pick its way across the frost-covered grass. "I'm going to let them have each other and get on with my life." "Just like that?" "Just like that." There was a pause, and I could hear my father's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. "Your father wants to talk to Mark again," Mom said. He's not taking this well." "How is Mark taking it?" "Like a man who knows he's made a terrible mistake but doesn't know how to fix it." That surprised me. "He said that?" "He didn't have to. I've known that boy for 36 years, Sean. He's always wanted what other people had, but he's never been good at keeping it once he got it." The observation was more insightful than I'd expected from my mother, who usually saw the best in everyone, especially her sons. "What about Emily?" I asked. "What about her? Is she there?" "She's in the living room with your father. They've been talking for 20 minutes. I tried to picture that conversation, Emily, with her HR training and professional smile, trying to explain to my 70-year-old father why she'd decided his son wasn't good enough for her anymore. Dad, who'd worked construction for 40 years and believed a man's word was his bond, trying to understand how someone could break promises that were supposed to last forever. "How's Dad handling it?" "About like you'd expect. He asked Mark to leave about an hour ago." "And Mark left?" "Mark left. Emily stayed." That was interesting. Emily had chosen to face my parents alone rather than stand united with her new boyfriend. Either she was braver than I'd given her credit for, or she was trying to salvage something from the wreckage of our family's relationship. "Sean, will you come down? Please? This family's been through enough damage." I looked around my workshop, at the tools and reminders of a life I'd built. 20 years of marriage reduced to a Sunday morning choice between anger and release. "I'll be there in an hour." "Thank you, honey." The drive took me through town, past the places that marked our life together. My parents' house looked unchanged, ordinary, steady, everything Emily once called limiting. Dad waited on the porch, studying me the way he used to when deciding which son to scold. "Your mother's worried." "I'm fine." "Are you?" "I'm getting there." Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen table, small and tearful. "I owe you an apology," she said. "For which part?" "For all of it." "Okay," I said. "Apology noted." "That's it? You've been so calm? How can you just let go?" "You didn't leave me for Mark," I said. "You left me for the woman he convinced you could be, someone too special for what we had. But that woman doesn't exist. He told you a story because he wanted something that was mine and you believed it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You spent months mocking our marriage, turning my brother and our families against me. And now you want me to be angry about it?" "Yes," Emily whispered. "I want you to be angry. I want you to fight for us, for our marriage, for 20 years of history." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise her. Because that's what people do when they love each other." "Emily, you stopped loving me months ago, maybe years ago. You just didn't have the courage to admit it until Mark gave you an excuse." She was crying openly now, but I felt nothing except a kind of distant sadness for the woman she used to be. "So what happens now?" she asked. Now you go back to Mark's place, or wherever you're staying, and you figure out if the fantasy version of yourself can make you happy. I'll file for divorce tomorrow, and we'll divide up 20 years of shared property like civilized adults. And then? Then you live your life, and I live mine." Emily wiped her eyes with a tissue from her purse, the same purse she'd been carrying the night she told me not to wait up. "I never wanted it to end like this," she said. "How did you want it to end?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. "I don't know. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending to be happy with a life that felt too small for me." "Then you made the right choice." I stood up to leave, but Emily reached across the table and caught my hand. "Sean, wait. What if I made a mistake? What if Mark and I don't work out?" I looked down at her hand on mine, at the wedding ring she was still wearing, at the woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams, and decided they weren't enough. "Then you'll figure something else out," I said, gently pulling my hand away. "But it won't be with me." I walked out of the kitchen, past my parents in the living room, and out to my truck. Behind me, I could hear Emily crying and my mother's voice offering comfort to a woman who'd broken her son's heart and split her family apart. The drive home was quiet, the radio off, just me and the sound of tires on asphalt and the wind through the trees. At home, I sat in my workshop and finished rebuilding Mrs. Henderson's garage door motor, losing myself in the simple pleasure of making something work again. My phone buzzed with a text from Tommy. "How'd it go?" "It went. Emily's staying with Mark, divorce papers get filed tomorrow, families are officially a mess." "You okay?" I thought about that while I cleaned my tools and put them away in their proper places. Was I okay? My wife was gone, my brother was gone, and 20 years of shared history had been reduced to a legal proceeding and a division of assets. But for the first time in months, I wasn't wondering where Emily was or what she was thinking or whether our marriage could be saved. The questions that had been eating at me since spring finally had answers, and the answers, while painful, were also liberating. "Yeah," I texted back. "I think I am." Outside, the wind was picking up, rattling the windows and reminding me that winter was coming. But inside my house now, everything was warm and solid and mine. It was enough. More than enough. It was honest. 3 weeks later, I was rewiring the second floor of the Hendricks building when my phone rang. Emily's number appeared on the screen, which surprised me since we'd been communicating through lawyers since the divorce papers were filed. "Sean, I need to talk to you." Her voice was strained, different somehow than it had been during our previous conversations. "About what?" The lawyer said everything was settled. "Not about the divorce, about Mark." I set down my wire strippers and walked to the window overlooking Main Street, where normal people were going about their normal Monday afternoon business. "What about Mark?" Things aren't working out the way we thought they would." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" The question caught me off guard. "Emily, what do you want?" "I want to meet. One last time. There are things I need to tell you, things you need to know about Mark and what really happened between us. I know what happened. You had an affair, you left me for him, now you're living together. What else is there?" "Please, Sean, meet me at the old paper mill tonight, 8 o'clock. I'll explain everything." The paper mill had been closed for 10 years, a victim of changing economics and cheaper overseas production. It sat on the edge of town like a monument to better times, all broken windows and rusted machinery. It wasn't the kind of place for a casual conversation. "Why there?" "Because it's private, because I don't want anyone else to hear what I have to tell you." Something in her voice set off alarm bells in my head. Emily sounded desperate, but also calculating, like she was working an angle I couldn't see yet. "Emily, if this is some kind of attempt to get me back, it's not, I promise. I just need you to know the truth about Mark before it's too late." The line went quiet, and I could hear wind in the background, like she was calling from outside. "Too late for what?" "Just meet me, Sean, 8 o'clock, come alone." She hung up before I could respond, leaving me standing in an empty building with more questions than answers. I called Tommy, who was working a job across town. "Boss, that sounds like a trap," he said after I explained the situation. "That's what I was thinking." "You want backup?" "Not backup, exactly, but maybe you could be in the area, just in case." "I'll be there. What do you think she wants?" "I have no idea, but Emily doesn't do anything without a reason." The rest of the afternoon dragged by slowly. I finished the second floor wiring, cleaned up my tools, and drove home through streets that were starting to feel familiar again. The house welcomed me back with the comfortable silence of a place that belonged to one person and no one else. At 7:30, I drove to the paper mill through the October darkness. The building loomed against the cloudy sky like something out of a horror movie, all broken glass and twisted metal. Emily's car was already there, parked near the main entrance. I found her inside, standing in what used to be the main production floor. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting strange shadows across the empty space where hundreds of people had once worked. "Sean!" She turned when she heard my footsteps. "Thank you for coming." "What's this about, Emily?" She looked different in the dim light, smaller, more fragile than the confident woman who'd walked out of our house 3 weeks ago. "Mark's been lying," she said. "About everything. About his business, about his finances, about why he really wanted me to leave you." "What kind of lies?" "His real estate company is failing. Has been for months. He's been using client escrow accounts to pay his personal expenses, and the state licensing board is investigating him." I absorbed this information while watching Emily's face for tells. She was nervous, but there was something else underneath. Calculation? Like she was playing a game I didn't understand yet. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because he's planning to disappear. Tonight. He's got a bag packed and a plane ticket to somewhere that doesn't extradite, and he wants me to go with him. So go." "I can't. Sean, he's been using me. The affair, the divorce, all of it. He planned it because he needed someone to help him hide his assets. He thought if we got married, I'd be protected by spousal privilege and couldn't be forced to testify against him." The pieces were starting to fit together, but the picture they made didn't explain why Emily had called me here. What does this have to do with me? "He's been forging documents, using your name, your credit, your identity to open accounts and move money. When the investigation gets serious, you're going to be implicated." That got my attention. "What kind of documents?" "Loan applications, bank accounts, investment portfolios. He's been planning this for over a year, Sean. The affair was just part of it." I walked to one of the broken windows and looked out at the empty parking lot, where Tommy's Honda was hidden behind a stand of trees. Emily's story was plausible, but it felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced it. "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have proof." She pulled a manila envelope from her purse and handed it to me. Inside were photocopies of documents bearing my forged signature, bank statements for accounts I'd never opened, and loan applications for money I'd never borrowed. "Jesus, Emily. How long have you known about this?" "I started figuring it out last week. Mark's been getting phone calls at all hours, and he's been drinking more than usual. When I confronted him about it, he told me everything." "And you decided to warn me out of the goodness of your heart?" Emily's expression hardened. "I decided to warn you because I'm not going to prison for Mark's crimes, and neither should you." "So what do you want me to do about it?" "Help me stop him. He's meeting someone here tonight at 9 o'clock, someone who's going to help him disappear. If we can record that conversation, get evidence of what he's been doing, maybe we can both get out of this without being destroyed." I looked at the documents again, recognizing my address and social security number on forms I'd never seen before. If Emily was telling the truth, Mark hadn't just stolen my wife, he'd been stealing my identity. "Where is he now?" "On his way here. He thinks I'm meeting him alone to give him my answer about running away together." "And what's your real answer?" Emily met my eyes in the dim light. "My real answer is that I made a mistake. A terrible, stupid mistake that's cost me everything I actually cared about." "Including me?" "Especially you." The admission hung in the air between us like smoke. Outside, I could hear a car engine approaching, headlights sweeping across the broken windows. "That's him," Emily whispered. Mark's BMW pulled into the parking lot, and I watched my brother get out of the car with a duffel bag and a briefcase. He looked around nervously before heading toward the building. "Sean, whatever happens, I need you to know that I'm sorry, for all of it." "Save it for later," I said. "Right now, let's focus on not going to prison." Mark's footsteps echoed through the empty building as he made his way toward us. When he appeared in the doorway of the production floor, his face went from relief to shock to anger in the space of a heartbeat. "What the hell is he doing here?" Mark demanded. "I told him everything," Emily said. "About the forgeries, about the money, about your plan to disappear." Mark's face went pale. "You did what?" "I told him the truth, Mark. Something you've never been very good at." Mark looked between Emily and me, his expression cycling through panic and calculation. "Sean, whatever she told you." "Is it true?" I interrupted. "Have you been using my identity to commit fraud?" "It's not that simple. It's a yes or no question, Mark." My brother set down his bags and ran his hands through his hair. "I was going to pay it all back. The real estate market's been tough, and I needed some temporary financing. Using my name and credit. I knew you'd never agree to help me, even though we're family. Because what you were doing was illegal. Because you've always been jealous of my success." The words echoed through the empty building like a gunshot. Mark's mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the resentment and entitlement that had been driving him all along. Jealous? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mark, you're about to be indicted for fraud. Your business is failing, your girlfriend just betrayed you, and you're planning to flee the country. What exactly would I be jealous of? You always had everything handed to you, Mark continued, his voice rising. The perfect marriage, the steady job, everyone thinking you were the responsible brother. Well, guess what? I took Emily, and I took your credit, and I took your precious reputation. How does it feel to lose everything? Like justice, I said. Mark lunged toward me, but I was ready for him. 20 years of physical labor had kept me in better shape than his desk job had kept him, and I sidestepped his charge easily. He stumbled past me and crashed into a pile of old machinery. Mark, stop, Emily shouted. This isn't helping anyone. Shut up, Mark got to his feet, a thin line of red running from a cut on his forehead. This is your fault. If you hadn't told him, if I hadn't told him, we'd both be accessories to your crimes. Mark pulled out his phone and started dialing. I'm calling this off. The whole thing. I'll find another way. There is no other way, a new voice said from the doorway. We all turned to see a man in an expensive suit walking toward us, flanked by two other men who looked like they'd be more comfortable in a gym than a business meeting. Mr. Foster, the man said, you've caused us a great deal of trouble. Mark's face went white. Vincent, I can explain. You can explain why you've involved civilians in our business arrangement, why you've brought your family drama into a professional relationship. I realized we were no longer dealing with just fraud and forgery. Mark had gotten involved with people who operated outside the law, and Emily and I were now witnesses to whatever arrangement they'd made. This is a family matter, I said, stepping between the newcomers and Emily. It doesn't concern you. Vincent smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Mr. Mallory, the real Mr. Mallory, I'm afraid it became our concern when your brother used your identity to secure a loan from our organization. What kind of loan? The kind that requires collateral, physical collateral. The implications hit me like a freight train. Mark hadn't just been forging documents for bank loans, he'd been borrowing money from criminals and using my identity as security. How much? I asked. $200,000, plus interest, plus penalties for non-payment. Mark was backing toward the far wall, his face a mask of terror. Vincent, I told you I'd have the money by tonight. You told us many things, Mr. Foster. Most of them were lies. Emily grabbed my arm. Sean, we need to get out of here. But Vincent's associates had moved to block the exits, and I realized we weren't leaving until this situation was resolved one way or another. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent said, his voice calm and professional. Mr. Foster is going to transfer the deed to his brother's house to our organization. Mrs. Mallory is going to witness the transaction, and Mr. Mallory is going to pretend this conversation never happened. Like hell, I said. Vincent sighed. Mr. Mallory, your brother has put you in a very difficult position. We can resolve this amicably, or we can resolve it through other means. The choice is yours. I looked at Mark, cowering against the wall, and felt the last of my family loyalty evaporate. Mark, is there anything else you haven't told me? Any other ways you've destroyed my life that I should know about? Sean, I'm sorry. Answer the question. The house. I used the house as collateral for the loan, but I was going to pay it back before you ever found out. You put my house up as collateral for a loan from criminals? I didn't have any choice. I turned to Vincent. What happens if I refuse to sign over the deed? Then we collect the debt through other means. The threat was clear, and I realized Mark's crimes had put all of us in danger. But I also realized something else. Emily's call hadn't been about warning me or stopping Mark. It had been about getting me here so Vincent could collect his collateral in person. Emily, I said, not taking my eyes off Vincent, how long have you known about this meeting? Her silence was answer enough. You set me up. Sean, I had to... You brought me here to sign over my house to criminals. They said they'd hurt you if I didn't cooperate. And you believed them instead of calling the police? Vincent clapped slowly. Very good, Mr. Mallory. You're smarter than your brother gave you credit for. I looked around the empty building, calculating distances and options. Tommy was outside somewhere, but he didn't know what we were dealing with. The police were miles away, and I was standing in an abandoned building with criminals who wanted my house, a brother who'd betrayed me, and a wife who'd lured me into a trap. You know what? I said, reaching into my jacket pocket. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Vincent's associates tensed, probably expecting a weapon. Instead, I pulled out my phone. See, I've been recording this conversation since you walked in, I continued, holding up the device. And my friend outside has been doing the same thing, so now we have evidence of extortion, fraud, and criminal conspiracy. Vincent's professional calm cracked slightly. Mr. Mallory, I don't think you understand the seriousness of your situation. I understand it perfectly. Mark committed fraud using my identity. You loaned him money based on forged documents. Emily lured me here under false pretenses. And all of you seem to think I'm going to just hand over my house and walk away. The alternative is unpleasant. For who? I pressed a button on my phone, and suddenly the building was flooded with light. Tommy had found the main electrical panel and restored power to the emergency lighting system. A moment later, I heard sirens in the distance. See, the thing about being an electrician, I said, is that you learn to plan for emergencies. Tommy called the police 20 minutes ago, as soon as he saw your associates arrive. Vincent and his men were looking around nervously, realizing their simple collection operation had become a crime scene with witnesses and evidence. This isn't over, Vincent said. Yes, it is. The police arrived in force, 3 cars with lights flashing and officers who looked like they'd been briefed on what to expect. Vincent and his associates were arrested without incident, probably calculating that cooperation was better than adding assault charges to their problems. Mark was arrested for fraud and identity theft. Emily was arrested as an accessory, and I was left standing in an abandoned paper mill, watching 20 years of family history get loaded into police cars. You okay, boss? Tommy appeared at my elbow, looking concerned. Getting there. What happens now? I looked around the empty building, at the broken windows and rusted machinery and evidence of dreams that hadn't worked out the way people had planned. Now I go home, I said. To my house, in my town, with my life. And Emily? Emily made her choices. Now she gets to live with them. We walked out of the paper mill together, leaving the past behind in a building that was already being sealed off as a crime scene. Outside, the October night was clear and cold, with stars visible despite the streetlights. Tommy? Yeah, boss? Thanks for having my back. Always. I drove home through empty streets, past the places where I'd grown up and built a life, and learned that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you worst. But I'd also learned that sometimes, when everything falls apart, what's left is stronger than what you started with. The house was waiting for me, solid and honest and mine. I sat in my workshop and poured myself a whiskey, listening to the sound of my life settling into its new shape. It was quieter than before, but it was real. And after months of lies and betrayal and games I'd never wanted to play, real was exactly what I needed. The whiskey was smooth and warm, and for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I belonged.